Most people don't fail because they don't have money. They fail because they never learn how money actually works, and Michael Carter was one of them. For 5 years, he worked nearly 60 hours a week at a small warehouse just outside Dallas, earning a steady paycheck, paying his bills on time, doing everything he was told would lead to a better life. Yet somehow at the end of every month, his bank account never showed more than a few $100s, sometimes less than $500, and on. Some months barely $200. He kept telling himself that if he just worked harder things would change, but deep down he felt stuck, like he was running on a treadmill that never moved forward. One hot afternoon after finishing a long shift, Michael sat in his car staring at his phone, looking at his balance again, and something inside him felt heavy, not anger, not sadness, just a quiet realization that nothing was changing. That night, as he drove home through quiet streets lined with large houses he had never noticed before, he slowed down near a neighborhood filled with homes worth over $2 million. And for the first time, he asked himself a simple question. How do people actually get here? Not just survive, but build something. He parked his car and stepped out, walking slowly past one of the largest houses on the street. The lights were on inside, warm and calm, nothing flashy, just peaceful. Something pulled him closer, not curiosity alone, but a feeling that maybe the answer he had been looking for was not in working more hours, but in understanding something he had completely missed. He stood there for a moment, thinking about every paycheck, every hour, every sacrifice, and then quietly said to himself, if I keep doing the same thing, nothing will ever change. And in that moment, without fully knowing why, Michael made a decision that would change the direction of his life, not by working harder, but by finally questioning the system he had been living in. For years, Michael stood there for a few seconds, unsure of what he was doing, but something inside him refused to let him walk away. The gate in front of the house was slightly open, not wide, just enough for a person to step through. He hesitated, looked around, then slowly walked in. His heart was not racing with fear, but with a strange sense of urgency, like he had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. The driveway stretched long and clean, leading to a quiet house that felt more peaceful than impressive. As he got closer, he noticed an older man sitting on a chair near the porch, holding a cup of coffee, calm, relaxed, as if he had been expecting no one, and yet surprised by nothing. Michael stopped a few feet away and spoke with a respectful tone. I am sorry, sir, I did not mean to intrude. I was just walking by, and somehow ended up here. The man looked at him for a moment, not judging, not confused, just observing. Then he gave a small smile and said, most people do not end up here by accident. They either have a reason or they are searching for one. Michael felt those words hit deeper than expected. He nodded slightly and said, I think I am searching. The man placed his cup down and leaned forward. What are you looking for? Michael paused, trying to find the right words. Then he said honestly, I work hard every day, but my life is not moving forward. I do not understand what I am doing wrong. The man studied him for a moment and asked, how much do you earn in a month? Michael answered, around $4,000, sometimes a little more with overtime. The man nodded. And how much do you keep at the end of the month? Michael looked down and said quietly, almost nothing. The man leaned back and said in a calm voice, then your problem is not your income. It is your system. Michael frowned slightly. System? The man continued, yes, the way you earn, spend, think, and act. That is your system, and right now your system is designed to keep you exactly where you are. Michael felt a mix of confusion and curiosity. No one had ever explained it like that before. He always thought he needed more money, not a different way of thinking. The man stood up slowly and walked a few steps closer. If I give you more money right now, you might feel better for a few weeks, maybe a few months, but eventually you will return to the same place, because nothing inside your system has changed. Michael stayed silent, letting those words sink in. Then he asked, so what should I change first? The man looked at him with a steady gaze and said, before you try to build a business, before you try to make more money, you need to understand one simple rule. If you do not control your money will control you. And that is where most people lose before they even begin. Michael listened carefully, his mind still holding on to the idea that earning more money was the answer. But something about the way the man spoke made him question everything he believed. He took a slow breath and said, I always thought if I just made more money things would get better. The man nodded gently and replied, that is what most people believe. But earning more without control only makes the problem bigger. Then he pointed toward the street and said, "Do you see those houses? Some of the people living there earn less than others who are still struggling. The difference is not how much they earn. It is how they manage what they earn." Michael looked back at the quiet street, realizing he had never thought about it that way before. The man continued, "Let me ask you something simple. When you get your paycheck, what do you do first?" Michael answered honestly, "I pay my bills, rent, food, gas, and whatever is left I try to save." The man smiled slightly and said, "And that is exactly why nothing changes." Michael frowned, confused. The man continued, "You are paying everyone else first and leaving yourself whatever remains. And most of the time that is nothing." Michael stayed silent, feeling a quiet discomfort, because he knew it was true. The man then said in a calm voice, "The first step is not to earn more. It is to change the order. You must pay yourself first. Even if it is only $100 out of 4,000, you take it out before anything else. You protect it. You do not touch it. That is the seed." Michael looked up and asked, "But what if I cannot cover all my expenses?" The man replied, "Then you do not have a money problem. You have a lifestyle problem. And until you fix that, no business will save you." Those words felt heavy, but clear. Michael realized that for years he had been reacting to money instead of controlling it. The man continued, "Money follows structure, not effort. If your structure is broken, more effort will only make you more tired, not more successful." Michael slowly nodded, beginning to understand. Then the man took a small notebook from the table and handed it to him. "Starting tomorrow, write down every dollar you earn and every dollar you spend. Do not guess. Do not assume. Know exactly where your money goes, because what you do not track, you cannot control." Michael held the notebook, feeling like it was something simple, yet something he had never truly done before. The man then added one more thing. "And remember this, the goal is not to feel rich today. The goal is to build control, because once you control your money, you can begin to build something real, something that does not disappear at the end of the month." Michael looked at the notebook again, realizing that this small step was not about money alone. It was about changing the way he lived his life, and for the first time, he felt like he was not stuck anymore. He just had not been looking at the right place. The next morning, Michael woke up earlier than usual, not because he had to go to work, but because something inside him felt different. For the first time in years, he was not just reacting to life. He was preparing to change it. He sat at his small kitchen table with the notebook in front of him, staring at the blank page for a few seconds before writing down his income for $1,000. Then slowly he began listing every expense he could remember. Rent, $1,200. Groceries, $400. Gas, $200. Phone, subscriptions, small daily purchases he had never paid attention to before. Coffee, snacks, random online orders. Each number seemed small on its own, but as he added them together, the total grew quickly. And when he reached the end, he realized something that made him pause. He was not just spending money. He was leaking it, quietly, consistently, without noticing. That evening after work, he returned to the house. The same calm place, the same quiet street. The man was sitting in the same chair, as if nothing had changed, but Michael knew everything had. He walked up and said, "I did what you told me. I tracked everything, and I think I understand now." The man looked at him and asked, "What did you see?" Michael replied, "I am not broke because I do not earn enough. I am broke because I do not control where my money goes." The man smiled slightly and nodded. That is the first shift. Awareness. Most people never reach that point. They spend their entire lives guessing, hoping, blaming, but never actually looking. Michael sat down across from him and asked, "What comes next?" The man leaned forward and said, "Now you build discipline. Knowing where your money goes is only the beginning. Controlling it is the real step. Starting this month, you will set a rule. No matter what happens, you will save at least 10% of your income. That is $400, not after your expenses, but before them." Michael hesitated. That felt difficult, almost uncomfortable. "What if something unexpected happens?" he asked. The man replied calmly, "Something unexpected always happens. That is why discipline matters, not when it is easy, but when it is hard." Michael nodded slowly. Then the man continued, "And here is something important. Saving money is not the goal. It is preparation. You are not just collecting dollars. You are building the ability to make decisions, because once you have control and a small reserve, You can begin to take calculated risks without fear controlling you. Michael listened closely, realizing this was not just about money anymore. It was about freedom, the freedom to choose, to try, to fail, and to try again. The man then looked at him and said, "And when you reach that point, when you have control and discipline, then you are ready for the next step, not working for money, but learning how to create it." Over the next few weeks, Michael followed the rule with quiet discipline. Every paycheck that came in, he set aside $400 before anything else. At first, it felt uncomfortable, almost like he was taking something away from himself. But slowly that feeling began to change. Instead of stress, he started to feel control. Instead of confusion, he felt clarity. And for the first time in years, his bank balance did not return to zero at the end of the month. One evening, he returned to the house again, holding the notebook that was no longer empty, but filled with numbers, patterns, and awareness. The man looked at him and asked, "How do you feel now?" Michael answered honestly, "I feel different. I am not where I want to be yet, but I feel like I finally understand what is happening." The man nodded and said, "Good, because now you are ready for the next step." Michael leaned forward slightly. Focused, the man continued, "Most people spend years trying to earn more money without increasing their value, and that is why they stay stuck. If you want to build something from nothing, you must first become someone who can create value." Michael listened carefully, then asked, "What does that mean exactly?" The man replied, "It means you need a skill, something useful, something people are willing to pay for, not just your time, but your ability." Michael thought for a moment and said, "I already work hard every day." The man shook his head gently and said, "Working hard is not a skill, it is a requirement. The difference between staying where you are and moving forward is what you can do that others cannot, or what you can do better than most." Michael stayed quiet, realizing he had never truly focused on building a valuable skill. He had only focused on doing his job well enough to keep it. The man then asked, "What do you know how to do?" Michael answered, "I work in a warehouse. I manage inventory. I organize shipments. I handle equipment." The man nodded and said, "Good. That is a starting point. Now the question is, how can you improve it? How can you make it more valuable? How can you turn it into something that solves a problem for others?" Michael felt his mind beginning to shift again. This was different from anything he had thought about before. The man continued, "You do not need 10 skills. You need one strong skill that you continue to improve every day. Read about it, practice it, understand it deeper than the average person. Because once you become valuable, opportunities begin to appear." Michael looked at the notebook in his hands, then back at the man, and asked, "How long does this take?" The man smiled slightly and said, "Longer than you want, but shorter than you think, if you stay consistent." Michael took a deep breath, realizing that this was not a quick path, but it was a real one. And for the first time, he was not just hoping for change. He was beginning to build it step by step. In the following days, Michael began to look at his work differently. What once felt like routine tasks now became opportunities to learn. Instead of simply moving boxes or checking inventory, he started asking questions. How does the system work? Why are some processes faster than others? Where do delays happen? And more importantly, how can they be improved? At first, no one noticed the change, but inside Michael, something was shifting. He was no longer just trading hours for dollars. He was building understanding. Every night after work, he spent 1 hour reading, watching tutorials, and studying logistics, supply chains, and small business operations. It was not easy. Some nights he felt tired. Some nights he wanted to skip. But he remembered the words, "Consistency matters more than intensity." So he kept going, week after week, slowly connecting ideas. One evening, he returned to the house again, this time with a different kind of energy. The man looked at him and said, "You are starting to see things differently." Michael nodded and replied, "I think I am beginning to understand. I am not just working anymore. I am learning how things work." The man smiled and said, "Good, because that is the moment most people never reach. They stay in their job, but they never study it. They never master it. They never turn it into something valuable." Michael then asked, "What should I do next?" "I am learning, but I am still earning the same." The man leaned forward slightly and said, "That is because you are still thinking like an employee. You are waiting to be paid for your time, but value is not measured by time. It is measured by results." Michael stayed quiet, listening carefully. The man continued, "The next step is simple but difficult. You must start creating value before you are paid for it. Michael looked confused. How can I do that without a business? The man replied calmly. You do not need a business yet. You need proof. Find a problem. Solve it. Even if no one pays you at first. Because once you can show that you can create results, people will begin to notice. Michael thought for a moment and said, at my job, there are always delays in shipments. Things get disorganized and it slows everything down. The man nodded and said, then start there. Improve it. Create a better system. Do not wait for permission. Just do it. Even if no one asks you to. Michael felt a mix of excitement and uncertainty. What if they do not care? What if it does not work? The man replied with a calm voice. That is part of the process. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the path to it. What matters is that you start. Because the moment you create value, even in a small way, you stop being replaceable. And when you are no longer replaceable, your opportunities begin to grow. Michael nodded slowly, realizing that this was the next step, not waiting for change, but creating it. Even if no one was watching yet, the next day Michael arrived at work earlier than usual, not because anyone asked him to, but because he had decided to take action. He walked through the warehouse slowly, observing everything with a new perspective, the misplaced boxes, the delayed shipments, the confusion between teams. Problems that once felt normal now stood out clearly, and instead of ignoring them like everyone else, he started writing them down, one by one. During his breaks, he sketched a simple plan, a better way to organize incoming shipments, a clearer labeling system, a small change in how items were tracked. It was not perfect, and he was not sure if it would even work, but for the first time he was not waiting. He was creating. Later that week, he quietly tested one small part of his idea. He reorganized a section of the storage area during a slow shift. It took extra effort, and no one told him to do it, but he wanted to see what would happen. The next day, something unexpected occurred. The team working that section finished their tasks faster. There was less confusion, fewer delays. It was a small improvement, but it was real. Michael noticed it immediately, but more importantly, so did his supervisor, who asked, what changed here? Michael hesitated for a moment, then explained what he had done. The supervisor listened carefully, then nodded and said, keep going. That was all he needed to hear. Over the next few weeks, Michael continued refining his system, making small adjustments, learning from mistakes. Sometimes things did not work as expected. Sometimes he had to redo everything. But each attempt made him better, more aware, more confident, and slowly his role at work began to change, not officially, but in how people saw him. He was no longer just following instructions. He was solving problems. One evening he returned to the house again, this time with a sense of quiet pride. The man looked at him and asked, what did you learn? Michael replied, I learned that creating value is not about big ideas. It is about solving real problems, even small ones. The man smiled and said, exactly. And now you are ready for the next shift. Michael leaned forward, listening closely. The man continued, what you are doing now is powerful, but it is still limited, because you are creating value inside someone else's system. The next step is to take that ability and apply it outside, where you are not limited by a paycheck. Michael paused, thinking about what that meant. The man added, you have learned how to control your money. You have started building a skill, and now you are proving you can create results. The question is, are you ready to take that skill and turn it into something of your own, something that does not depend on a job? Michael felt a mix of excitement and uncertainty, because for the first time, the idea of starting something from zero did not feel impossible. It felt real, and within reach. Michael sat quietly after hearing those words. The idea of building something of his own no longer felt like a distant dream, but it also did not feel easy. He looked at the man and asked, where do I even begin? I do not have a business. I do not have customers. I do not have anything. The man nodded and said, that is exactly why you are ready. Because now you understand that business does not start with money. It starts with solving a problem. Michael thought for a moment, then said, I know there are many small warehouses in my area, and they struggle with the same issues we had: disorganization, delays, wasted time. The man smiled slightly and said, then you already have your starting point. You do not need a perfect plan. You need a simple offer. Go to one small business and show them what you can improve. Do not talk about yourself. Talk about their problem and show them a solution. Even if you do it for free the first time, Because what you are building is not just income. You are building proof. Michael felt a mix of fear and excitement. What if they say no? He asked. The man replied calmly. Most people will say no, but that is not failure. That is feedback. Each no brings you closer to a yes. What matters is that you keep going. Michael nodded slowly, understanding that this step required courage, not comfort. Over the next few days, he prepared himself. He wrote down the common problems he had seen. He outlined simple improvements, and he practiced explaining them clearly. One afternoon, he walked into a small local warehouse, not much bigger than a few thousand square feet, and introduced himself. His voice was not perfect, but it was honest. He explained what he had done at his job and how he could help reduce delays and improve organization. The owner listened, not fully convinced, but curious enough to give him a chance. Michael offered to work for free for 1 week, just to show results. The owner agreed, and that was the beginning. During that week, Michael worked harder than ever, not because he had to, but because he finally saw a path forward. He applied everything he had learned, tested ideas, made adjustments, and slowly the system began to improve. By the end of the week, the warehouse was running smoother, orders were processed faster, and the owner noticed the difference. For the first time, Michael was not just earning money, he was creating it. And as he stood there looking at the results, he realized something important. Starting from zero was never about having nothing. It was about using what you already have in a different way. And just as things were beginning to change, he knew the next step would be even bigger, because now he had to turn this small success into something that could grow. The following week, Michael returned to the house once again. But this time something was different. He was not carrying questions. He was carrying results. The man looked at him, and before Michael could speak, he said, "You have changed, not on the outside, but in the way you think." Michael nodded and said, "I understand now. I did not start with money. I started with a problem, and when I solved it, the opportunity appeared." The man smiled and asked, "And what will you do next?" Michael paused for a moment, thinking carefully. Then he said, "I will do it again, but better. I will find more businesses, more problems, and I will keep improving." The man nodded and said, "That is how it begins, not with one big success, but with repeated small wins." Then he continued, "Now you must understand the final step, because if you stop here, you will only create another job for yourself." Michael listened closely. The man explained, "Right now you are trading your skill for income, which is good, but it still depends on your time. If you want to grow, you must build a system that works even when you are not there." Michael thought about this carefully. "How can I do that?" he asked. The man replied, "You document what you do, you simplify it, and then you teach it to others. You create a process that can be repeated, because a true business is not just what you do. It is what can be done without you." Michael felt the weight of those words, realizing that this was a completely new level. The man continued, "First you controlled your money, then you built a skill, then you created value. Now you must build leverage, because without leverage, growth will always be limited." Michael nodded slowly, seeing the path more clearly than ever before. Over the next few months, he followed this principle. He refined his system, wrote down each step, tested it again and again, and eventually hired a part-time helper to assist him, teaching them exactly what to do. It was not perfect. There were mistakes, there were setbacks, but the system began to work, slowly but steadily. And for the first time, Michael saw income coming in even on days when he was not directly involved. One evening, he stood outside the same house where everything began, looking at the quiet street. But now his perspective had completely changed. He was no longer the man searching for answers. He was the man building something real. And as he looked back on his journey, he realized that starting from zero was never about lacking resources. It was about lacking understanding. Because once you understand the steps, control, skill, value, and leverage, you realize that the path was always there, hidden in the way you think, waiting for you to see it.